of, I'm going to turn it over to Anita Garrett. Thank you for being here, Anita.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to both Kate, Sarah. I got to tell you, it really does help when you've got a fabulous team that's ensuring that things can go smoothly, because with technology today, I think most of us are probably zoomed out, and then there's always something that's gonna transpire. Look, fingers crossed that the weather cooperates with us, because a monsoon just started a little while ago. I'm on the northeast side of town, then it stopped, could start back up again. So I really, really do appreciate SC Will and the team for helping and inviting me to have this conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm excited. I actually am. I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I would add one agreement, if we will. We've got some ground rules, and this is maybe underscoring one of the ground rules that was stressed, which is this is the beginning of a conversation. It might be the middle of a conversation for some of us, but it is not the be all to end all for this conversation. Hopefully in your space, wherever you are, you may walk away with more questions than answers, and that's okay, because that's what a conversation looks like. It is to explore and debate and agree to disagree. So for that, I would just underscore. So let's start, if we can, by sharing in the chat, which would be great, or you can raise your hand if you want to be unmuted, one unique fact about yourself. We'll take just a couple of minutes, but I'd love to see what comes up. And while we're doing that, I think it was Eva, maybe. She's unfortunately been not able to get anything except water to drink because she's been sitting at her computer for a while. Feel free to move around, go get another drink, but share one unique fact about yourself. Just want to get some red wine. Barbara. Bring some back for Eva. She needs it. Have we figured out a way to, you know, it's like the Jetsons, for those of us that are old enough to remember it, I'm aging myself, to like send liquids through Zoom yet, or not?
We need Rosie to deliver it to us, right?
Oh, okay, yes, we need Rosie, but you remember the characters.
I recently made my children watch the Jetsons so that they would understand what it was. So.
We are there. We are there. So feel free.
I've gotten pretty close to sharing wine. She sends me a picture of her glass. I send her a picture back of my glass.
Okay, that's, you know, I like that. We will take the virtual sharing of libations as, you know, until we can actually get it through the tubes successfully without crashing everything. I like that.
So I want to know if Eva says, I'm so sorry. Eva says she always needs, you, Barbara,
I still don't know how to get the pictures on the TV set, so.
So I see Eva says that she always needs wine. I wonder, is that her interesting fact or just a general comment?
No, that was just a general comment. I mean, just assume at any point I could use a glass of wine.
It could be both and, right? Hey, unique fact. And
yeah, I mean, you know, there's better facts about me than Eva likes wine.
Right. So
I've got a kind of an intro. Oh, I like former college pole vaulter. I didn't know that, Kate.
What do you know? So when we've got these extreme hurdles to jump over, we know who to call on, literally or figuratively, right?
7 states. I'd like to hear what 7 states, Heather.
See, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Idaho, and Indiana.
Interesting mix of states at that.
Yes.
People tend to ask, I'm sure, was that military or was that your career? But
a little bit of both. My dad was in the Air Force, and then at least I joke that at least that was consistent. You knew you were moving every 2 or 3 years in the military, but when he got out, he worked in aviation, which was much less predictable. And then my husband and I took a job working with foster kids in Indiana for a year.
Wow. Okay, good. And so we've got, wow, you know, folks with some really unique last names, born in Holland, Michigan, where they raise tulips and still wash the streets. Yeah, we could use that everywhere, like the street washing and the flowers. I think that would be really nice. Let's propose that. So I guess my one unique fact is, let's see. I took ice skating lessons as I was growing up in Cincinnati from a former bronze gold Olympic medalist. We don't have any ice down here, so it's been a while since I've been out skating, but yeah, thank you for sharing that and for everyone else that shared.
Well, I am also a Buckeye by birth, so we have that in common.
All right, yeah, grew up in Cincinnati. Nice. All right, thanks everyone for sharing. So let's jump into this because again, we want to be mindful of our time. And I'm going to start by just giving you a quick summary. I'm going to actually read this because I really appreciated the overview, and then we will begin our conversation and our Q&A with discussion with you. So for those of you, even if you've not had a chance to read the book, Raising Our Hands, I think you are here because the general concept resonated with you. It is focused on the fact or the suggestion that Jenna Arnold, who over her years being in conversations with women across the country, was acknowledging that white American women are not a monolith. We can extrapolate and expand, but for the purposes of her book, that was her conversation. And as she kind of crisscrossed the US and had these received input, they were focusing on checking off what she found in conversations, checking off their to-do list, or afraid of getting things wrong, or so busy trying to avoid conflict that they were avoiding some of the urgent conversations that may have needed to have been had and held. So Raising Our Hands is a reckoning cry for white women. It's asking those in that demographic to step up and join the new front lines of the fight against complacency, whether that's in your homes, in your behaviors, or in your mind. So that is a summary of the conversation. And I'll start by asking a question about why you came to this conversation. Why are you here? What drew you to feeling that this was an important conversation? And again, I'll ask you to use the chat and then or raise your hand. Again, Sarah and Kate are going to help with making sure that we can hear you and that you'll be sharing. Or there was nothing better to do on television on a Monday night. And so, hey, why not? Let's just join this discussion.
Well, I'll start. This is Harriet Williams, and I'd like to give a unusual fact about myself before I respond to your question. It's not unusual, but I'm a retired professor. But the unusual thing is I at one time had 11 cats that I loved and nurtured. And finally today I have just 2 cats. I'm working my way down to 1 or 0. I have not read the book, I'll tell you, truthfully. I came to this because I wanted to learn more about the women in leadership in South Carolina. I'm interested in how women communicate with one another, and how sometimes we communicate well and how sometimes we do not communicate well. So I felt like meeting a lot of new people and hearing what you had to say about the book would make me curious and perhaps join you for more sessions.
It's a fabulous reason to be here. Thank you for sharing that, Harriet, and we hope the same. We believe, and I know that I truly can testify that participating in any of the activities, and this is not a commercial for SC Will, but as you were pointing out, it is one of various opportunities in the state to join a network of folks that are interested in learning and growing and having a conversation, be it about this specific topic or about what's happening in your community and or how you get engaged. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Anita, we have a few comments in the chat. I want to just draw your attention. Heather and me.
Yes. Heather, I'm here because I'm trying to learn more about the unspoken cultural rules I've observed and how I can combat the silence. Mandy says that she wants to learn to be a more effective partner for change and racial justice. Eva has shared, I'm biracial but white passing, and it has shaped my life in a way that contrasts with my siblings. The book is interesting because of her experience in the world. And Peggy has shared, because I was intrigued by the title, Raising Our Hands, and the underlying concept. Thank you.
It looks like Tashira also has her hand raised.
Please.
If you want to unmute yourself, Tashira.
I'm sorry, and as soon as you called on me, my dog started barking, so please excuse me if you hear that in the background. Ms. Harriet kind of hit the nail on the head for me as well. I really just wanted to learn more about women in leadership, and I have biracial children, and so I really just thought that it was a great platform for women to come together and have just an open, honest, respectful conversation, which I feel like does not happen a lot, especially if you stay in your own bubble. So I was just really interested to communicate with a diverse group of women about this.
Good, thank you. Did I hear someone else? Good. So I want to share that, again, there are no wrong answers, no right answers. This is a conversation that all of those reasons are a part of that lifelong learning that we're all, it appears, looking to accomplish and to grow and to connect. And so as it relates specifically to the book, I would say that, how do I put this? I believe that, as a reminder, oftentimes everything that we are looking for, especially as women, and this is Anita talking, this is just Anita, take it or leave it, agree or disagree, and this is where the conversation begins. More often than not, we have either everything that we need to know already, our gut has some sort of sense about the things that we need to know, or when we seek to have some understanding that's unfamiliar with us, it will present itself. What does that mean? In my estimation, this global conversation, you know, we're talking about 2 or 3 pandemics happening at once, right? We've got the pandemic of health, we've got the pandemic of race and social justice, we've got this pandemic. If that's the case, let's not make anything more difficult than it needs to be. It's kind of like the technology we were talking about. And for a lot of instances, just from my observations and experiences, because we will, it may be something that is foreign to us, not our direct experience, and there are cultural and unique experiences that are relevant. No one can say that they've walked in anyone else's shoes, but the otherizing that occurs, right? Well, I'm not a Black person, so I actually don't know what it's like to be Black, and I need to learn how to connect or I don't have biracial children, so I don't know what that's like and I need to learn. There are factors and there are things that we want to become more sensitive to and not be tone deaf about. Definitely. But there are also some basic things that will allow us to be open and acknowledge that everything we needed to know, the book said, we learned in kindergarten, right? So being kind is, you don't have to be in my skin to feel that it's a good thing to be kind. Not stealing. Hey, it's a good thing not to do that. How does this show up in our adult world? Well, if there are things happening in that community on the other side of the tracks that equate to, let's say, I don't know, stealing someone's land or history then we can move in some level of confidence with feeling comfortable to raise our hand and say, I'm sorry, excuse me. It kind of seems like this is what is taking place here. And begin that and push that conversation. As Jenna says, we are so busy trying to take care of ourselves and our family, which is valid. We are so more often concerned of getting it wrong that we freeze and we don't say anything. I was having a conversation with someone last week, and for some reason that, and who of you remembers The Emperor Has No Clothes, that fairy tale story? Does anybody raise it? The emperor is naked, right? And I think there's a kid in the story, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I got to go back and look it up again. There's a kid that shows up in the town and everybody's like, oh, the emperor's walking, and the little kid is saying, but he has no clothes on. Does anybody else see that? Is this not a thing, right? And what are we going to do? Oh, you can't say anything because it's going to make him uncomfortable. It's going to make us uncomfortable. Yeah, he's naked, but that's just the way it is. And let's not talk about it. That has been resonating with me for some reason this last month, to say, yes, we want to hear, know, learn, connect, grow with, but we also feel, see, observe certain things that we just have to have the courage to go, let's raise our hand. Now, having the courage, that's a whole nother discussion, and let's get into that. But tell me what you think about that.
I thought the title of the book was really appropriate because it is about literally raising your hand. I think where a lot of people shy away is they don't know how to bring it up. Like, they don't know how to talk about race without sounding like you're calling somebody out, or you're policing their language, or you're telling them that they're bad, when really, you're just trying to nudge this person along, perhaps because you may be the only person that's brought up to them that's not okay to say. I think we assume all racist talk is very blatant, but it's not always. And I think this book touched on a lot of the more pervasive ways that it's in our society. And I think like those conversations are actually a lot harder to have.
Thank you. Someone else.
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from just not knowing where to start. How do you start the conversation? And then once you start it, how do you keep it open and honest? So that, people can, so that you can hear, so that you can truly listen to the other parties involved, and they can listen to you.
Thank you. Other thoughts? So what I heard is, we tend to freeze How do we bring it up? The concern about it being perceived and received in a way perhaps that it wasn't intended, genuine care and curiosity about, I want to know how you feel, while at the same time balancing that with what I've heard recently, with not overtaxing that individual, right? So if we show up at work and we're like, hey, you're Black, can I ask you, like, could you tell me, like, explain to me what this means to you, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm hearing from Black women that are saying, and, you know, people of color and various communities that are going, oh, if one more person asked me, I don't want it to. Again, two things can be true, right? Wanting to connect and genuinely seeking knowledge is the right thing. Raise your hand. Also, having lived X number of years, feeling perhaps subjugated, feeling and experiencing and observing firsthand what may be perceived or real oppression, and now going, oh, now you want to talk to me about it. Well, you know, when I was saying that this was happening, I didn't really hear from that side or in that seat be a little frustrating. And what does that cause? I see it all the time. Then if you get a response from somebody, especially if you were brave enough to raise your hand and they go, well, you should have known, and that was just a stupid thing to say, and why would you say, then I would be a little apprehensive about engaging in that conversation again, because I might think the next person is going to respond in that manner. I would say that just as white American women are no monolith, all people are no monolith. Black women, communities of color, you might have one not so great experience with attempting a conversation, but that does not mean that we have to shy away from it, that we don't keep trying, that we don't seek conversations like this. I'm going to give a shout out to, you know, organizations like the Community Mediation Center, which, since, you know, and there are organizations like that across the state and across the country. Here locally, I'm very familiar with them, and it's all about sharpening our skill and enhancing our ability to communicate with diverse communities. Question, thought. Tanisha, have a diverse family. How do I raise my hand? So that let's go there. So how do you raise your hand? Can someone share perhaps a experience when they were brave enough to broach the subject, raise their hand, jump into the fray, that others might benefit from?
Well, I don't know if this is suitable for at this point in the conversation, but I was a professor at USC for 30 years, and during that time I had a number of African American students in my classes at various levels, from sophomore level to graduate school. And one of the things that I think I learned throughout the years was that although a conversation between student and professor is always a little bit stilted, it was even more so, I think, with the African American students in the beginning. But as we worked together, and I think they began to maybe sense that I genuinely was concerned about them learning the material that we were covering, conversations became more and more smooth. And I would meet with my individual students maybe once or twice or 3 times during a semester, where we had face-to-face conversations with no one else involved. I'm talking about African American students.
Mhm.
And the conversation became genuine, became real. They could express things to me, and I could ask questions of them about how they felt in class and how they felt interacting with other students in the class and that sort of thing. So for me, it was me realizing what I needed to do and somehow them realizing that it was genuine on my part. I don't know.
Thank you. Barbara or?
Yeah, I think Barbara had a question and was virtually and physically raising her hand.
I'm sorry. I was actually trying to figure out how to raise my hand. Kate told me in the chat box, when she said, okay, how do you raise your hand? I'm like, no, I mean, technically, this is one of those, how do I do
literally,
it?
I mean, literally.
No. So, I have been, this book really brought out something in me that I've been thinking about for a long time. And it is all the many do-gooders I know who talk the talk and then don't walk the walk. I mean, it really is, as she said in the book, that she would go through the tea parties or the coffees, and then people would say, oh, well, I've got to go pick my kids up from in the carpool line. And that would be the end of the conversation. For me, I think no matter what your politics are, I think the future of democracy is in many ways hinging on white women getting their boots on the ground, because there are a lot of activists out there. There are very few of the people, the moms who are picking up carpool, who are saying, this is about my life, this is about my future, my children's future, my grandchildren's future. I got lots of children and lots of grandchildren, and I want to make sure that, you know, they have clean water to drink and swim in, and, you know, fields to build forts in, and all the things that I really enjoyed doing when I was growing up. So my question back to everybody is, for all, and I know everybody on this call knows complacent people. It doesn't matter whether they're white, black, green, male, female, although the biggest chunk of those that I'm talking about are white women who are really busy with their lives, but they're not prepared to set aside time to save our world. What do you do to get them motivated now, not next year when, you know, there's swastikas painted on the Jewish furrier's window, but now when it's critical to?
That's a good question.
Voter suppression, ballot suppression, the census, all the things that, you know, Will works with. We need people to understand how important they are.
Yeah, and how time sensitive. So what are the thoughts?
Looks like Francis. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Francis, and chime right in.
Well, I would just like to say, as far as initiating conversation, one of the reasons, a good way to initiate conversation, another person on this call is my neighbor. Her name is Judy, and we have been in a book group made up of white parishioners from Grace Episcopal and black parishioners from the AME church right next door to us in downtown Charleston. And the conversation revolves around books that we've read. And sometimes it's easier to discuss something that is a little more abstract than just to go up to a person you may know. Now, I had an assistant principal for years, and she was black, and she knew that I would run stuff by her because I needed her help. I was unconsciously, I'm sure, doing and saying some things that, you know, were insensitive. And to be an anti-racist, you can't be doing that stuff. And so I would run things by her, but without her in my life now, you know, I don't have anybody like that. And so it's really good to be in those conversations where you hear from white and Black women and men from their point of view. And discussing a book is a little more abstract than just saying, how do you feel? So I would like to start something like that, you know, on John's Island, but I'm not sure how to go about it. And I think talking about a book is a great way to start the conversation.
Wow, Frances, I love that. Because just as Sarah was sharing at the beginning of this conversation, even when you have that dedicated group of folks, that cohort, that the book club, the what have you, we set some agreements up front. We set some standing ground rules, and we hope that everyone's going to honor that. So you've created that safe space. You know, in my professional day life and over the last several decades, that's one of the things for any, because what we're talking about is development, and it transcends whether it's professional development. I think on your job, when you went into training and they said, okay, I'm going to teach you how to type on the computer. The first thing that you don't do is put a drink next to your computer, because you could spill and then everything fries. You know, what they establish this agreement and say, here's how this is going to work. Similarly, professional development, we can say, okay, so we're going to have a conversation about this, and you're here, and you're here, and you're here, and it's Vegas, or it's wherever you want to call it, but this is what it is. Now, if someone betrays that trust, or I mean, I've seen situations that go south even when we've tried to set that up, and I've seen situations that have not been facilitated well, which is also a challenge, and folks walk away more angry than when they showed up. But 9 times out of 9, and 8.5, just saying, I'm here, I care, I'm letting my guard down, and being open to having the conversation. Frances, it's and then the other thing that was shared in Frances's example was where that safe environment was, right? So it's not the best time to go in when we're here to focus on work and try to have a discussion about, did you watch that thing on television last night? Because you don't know where people's perspectives are and their focus are and their priorities are. So pushing that conversation at the wrong time, it can do more harm than good. But when we use the arts, when we use, what was the word that Heather said? She said, the books, for example, that when we use something that was more abstract. I used to be on the board of Trustis Theater, and there was a play that came through, and I'd say it was called White People. And there was a talk back after the play. Now, this is long time ago. And it was a time where people were able to watch something, depersonalize it, and go, oh, that's so funny. But it's, it would be funny if it weren't sad, but it's so funny because I'm looking at it, and then unpack what they observe. So whether it's book, music, theater, art, that's a great way to begin the conversation with a group of like-minded folks, because they've showed up, they've come, they bought the ticket, and they knew what the title was, right? And to then see how far you can get with that conversation. And to Barbara's point earlier, it's important to find those meaningful experiences, as opposed to all of the discussion is great. The fact that there is awareness heightened about concerns is a good thing. Let's try to plug into something that's not just going to be lip service, but that where folks are, the do-gooders are actually then doing good. There's a book, and maybe we can send out some of these resources afterwards to follow up with people. I think the book title was something like When Doing Good Hurts, or something along those lines. And again, it was in the space of the nonprofit sector, but we've got a lot of people that show up and mean to be doing good, but there's an undercurrent that perhaps is just taking up the limited energy and space that's out there and might not be resulting or moving the ball down the field.
Eva had her hand raised. I'd love to hear what her thoughts are.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when I look at my friend group now, there's some, and to give it perspective, I'm in my mid to late 30s. There's some diversity in my friend group, but not nearly the diversity in my friend group that I had like when I was in college. And part of that is because when I was in college, I was always meeting people, and like I felt like every day there was somebody new, and you ended up with this large group of friends. And as I get older, that group gets smaller and smaller, and people become more like each other. And so I think, I know I struggle with this, and I see a lot of other people struggle with it too. How do you keep meeting new people and expanding your network and stuff like that in a personal sense as you get older? You know, because I have a small child, I'm busy with that, I'm working, and it's just hard to connect with people. And because I think so many of these important conversations happen personally. And so, you know, I just think that also plays into it. And I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background.
No, you're fine. And, you know, that's perfect, Eva, because you go find people that have dogs, right? So already we've got a common interest. Right?
Yeah. Do you also have a loud dog?
No, he barked right on cue. And you reminded me of something. When I was fundraising, we used to talk about friend raising, because again, challenging conversations, we're taught, don't talk about money, don't ask people about politics. So to actually be hired to go out and try to get people to give money to a cause, and I've got to make calls on them, this was always a thing. And we had to really, those that were good at it, realize this is relationship building. Don't look at it as, and this is again fundraising, don't look at it as sales calls. Don't look at it as, you know, shaking people down, because when you do that, then we already have this internal anxiety, right? But when I look at it as, I want to build a relationship with you before I ask you for the first dollar. I want to find out what you like, and, you know, just, what kind of things you do, or I already know these sorts of things because you're at the dog park and you're at this, and then we know how to be tactful, and just dropping a little discussion about, you'll know that this person is open and receptive to engaging in further conversation, or you'll know, we used to say bless and release, that that's not the person to have that discussion with. But you're starting from a place of commonality. Likewise, and as you were talking, the blind spots that we might not be aware of, and we're concerned that someone else may have, that, Eva, I think is, and just as Frances was saying, she was in a space where she knew people were agreeing that they wanted to read the book, they wanted to learn more. So we refer back to that, and they say, okay, remember that we're going to kind of push the envelope. Final note on that, because my daughter-in-law is a stay-at-home mom. She's in Louisiana with 2 toddlers, and she's like, I don't have time to get out. And all the people that are in those discussions don't have kids, so they're not inviting me, et cetera, et cetera. That underscores, again, if she's going to a mommy-daughter group or class, start with where you're at. And this is no perfect answer, but I just, start where you're at. Start where you're at.
Barbara had a good, or wanted to encourage or hear from Tashara about kind of the other side of being Black and having biracial kids, and just your thoughts on how to have these conversations, your perspective through your particular lens.
Oh, I'd be happy to. So I too, like I said, have dogs that might bark, and excuse me, I am also cooking dinner. My husband worked really hard today, so I figure I'd give him a little bit of a break. So speaking first to what Eva said and kind of where the conversation's been going, I think that especially if you're a mom, which not all women are, but mommy groups are a great way to really bridge the gap and to meet new people. And it also encourages your kids, especially if you're doing it and making the effort with people who don't look like you, for your kids to have a diverse circle. Because a lot of the times the kids see what we see and they model that. So I know that that is a really great way to meet new people, and it really takes effort. As much as, you know, we have so much going on, it's kind of got to be a concerted effort. In the same way when you're networking for work or for church, you kind of have to go in the mindset, I'm going to talk to 5 people I don't know, you know, when you do go out, which I still working on because I kind of stink at it. But as far as breaching conversations, it's kind of difficult with my family because my husband's family is really traditional. Like I feel like we have a wealth of knowledge in the family. Like his grandparents are still alive, and I'm like, I'd love to sit down and have a family dinner about what you guys were doing when you were, you know, older in high school and you know, younger in college when the civil rights movement was going on. And if you weren't doing anything, that's totally fine. Like teach your grandchildren how you got from, or great grandchildren, how you got from A to B. You know, what a blessing from God that you were able to grow. Unfortunately, you're not always going to be able to have those conversations with everybody, and not everybody is open. So having those conversations from my side, it can be difficult, but I have lots of coworkers and friends who are very open. Sometimes it can be taxing to be that person that everybody comes and talks to, but also I understand that if I'm not open, who's going to talk? You know, I may be the only person that they know. A lot of times your circle does look like you. And so I try my best to be open. And if I feel like someone's approaching me because they genuinely want to know and not because they want to A, find someone who agrees with them, or B, be defensive, then that, you know, I'm like, okay, this is not going to be a successful conversation. But anybody who's open and honest and comes to me with, hey, I've done a little bit of research, or I have a little bit of a question and I'd love for you to talk with me about that, I'm always open, and I encourage other people to as well. But speaking abstractly is a great way to start a conversation. I too love to go to Trustis and see plays, and that's always been a great conversation starter. I encourage my coworkers to go see it. I was like really amped up to encourage everybody to go see Fairview, and it absolutely broke my heart when, you know, obviously much bigger problems with COVID, but I think that would have been a great conversation starter in Columbia. But yeah, to recap, abstract is great. Making an effort to speak to people who don't look like you, and really just having genuine intents when approaching someone with you know, in the conversation. I'm used to it. My mom is biracial too, and so I kind of move seamlessly sometimes, with race, but with conversation. So I think it's easier for me than most.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about, I guess I would like to explore a little bit also about some of those norms that maybe we don't think about, that I feel like this book brought up, you know, the ability or the freedom for white women to choose when they want to speak and when they don't want to speak. You know, if they want to choose to put all of their time and energy into going to the gym all day long. And I mean, you know, we talk about all those women who are really busy but are not doing what we maybe think are meaningful things to make our society better, and to be in the position to have that choice. There are a lot of people that don't have that choice. They don't have the ability to stay home and sit back and, you know, enjoy the sort of proximity to power that's also mentioned in the book. And I think that's it has me thinking about the choices that we make, and that you have the freedom to make those choices, where some people do not have that same luxury.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, with that, then, am I hearing a question of what do we do about that?
I think what do we do about that is always the question.
Or is that a reality, and just that being the reality?
Yes, that, and I think that another thing that I think I've examined quite a lot since reading the book is the prioritizing the individual over sort of our collective accountability. I am very much subject to that. I know a lot of people who've come from all sorts of different difficult circumstances who've worked very hard and made themselves better. But that's not the reality for everyone. You know, your circumstances are not just determined by, you know, this is America and you can just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and be able to achieve anything. You know, the reality is if you don't have an education, if you don't have a support system, and again, I mean, I think that this is, I'm glad that we went over the ground rules because I think I'm subject as much as anyone. I feel like these are not even really fully formed thoughts, but things that really resonated with me that, you know, you like to think like, oh, you know, anyone can be anything, but really, is that the case?
Right.
And again, no answers as to, you know, what do we do about it? I think that just having the conversation is the important thing. You know, we're having the discussion and maybe that gets us to the answers eventually.
I love that. I've got a couple of thoughts, but I want to make sure if anyone else has thoughts on what Shara just shared, please. So, you know, I was thinking about, and there's everything, when things start trending, then we come up with all these buzzwords and we got new acronyms and, you know, again, we make it complicated, but the privilege is what we've been hearing a lot. And in that, as Sarah was talking about, well, if I've got the luxury of, or if someone has the luxury of doing other things, etc. And this is true. Remember, two things can be true. And I resonate back to what my grandmother used to always say is, you don't know what you don't know, number one. And she also used to say, common sense ain't so common, right? And she also used to, somebody write this down, this is good, I forgot about this. And she also used to talk about educated fools, all right? So this was all in the context, and this was a woman who used to wash clothes and laundry at a Black institution and iron things for folks that, I mean, she didn't have an education herself, but in that, what she was acknowledging was there's privilege. But if this is all you've known and been introduced to or has been shared, as Tashara was talking about, you know, my family might not have some of these conversations, etc. It's just the way things have been, or my relatives' family, then we can be lulled into assuming the stereotypes, I believe, that are projected out there. We have to fight hard against it, and sometimes in our gut it might not feel like this can be the reality, and the fighting hard means, Sarah's words, how do we prioritize individuals over what we assume is the collective of a people, the circumstances that might be unique. When we do that, it seems to me that we are going to be more likely, more often, to look at individuals and learn, and then not and push the conversation when we see someone else stereotyping. Also, just wanted to throw in that little known secret. There's oppression and or race, class issues within the Black community. And there are reasons why people, Black and white, in my estimation, don't have certain conversations. And that can be because of some internalized trauma. My parents didn't tell me anything about the 60s, and they were right there. But because of the hopes that they had for, or we're maybe not post-racial, but for me to not have to go through some of that, they didn't have the conversation either. Across town, Jimmy's parents might not have had the discussion about how his uncle always uses the N-word, and that's just uncle, and he's just that way. So we just have this grace, we bless and release, but then we call out when we see it and say, yeah, whatever the reason is that we're here, we can't be here any longer. My 2 cents. Other thoughts?
Kate, go ahead, jump right in.
So two things with regard to the calling out. First, my friend told me a great story from when she went to the beach with her mom and some of her mom's friends who were more conservative earlier this summer. Apparently they were all on a boat or in some sort of like circular formation. And one of the other people that she didn't know very well started making derogatory comments about either Alan or Benedict. And my friend just said straight up, "Are you a racist?" in front of this whole group. Now, it probably wasn't. It was probably, I don't think she got along great for the rest of the 5 days that she was there. But it warmed my heart when she told me, because she was really standing up for like her values and, you know, her, you know, standing up against injustice, which it's hard to do. I mean, the rest of her trip was probably pretty awkward with this particular person, but sometimes you see something, you gotta say something. The other story that I have from my own life where I had to kind of have a heart-to-heart with my family was 3 years ago. I went home for Christmas after breaking up with my fiance. And so I met up with one of my girlfriends who lived in Brooklyn, and found out that she wasn't going home for Christmas. Well, because her parents she's Nigerian and her parents were in Nigeria and she didn't have anywhere to go for Christmas. So I was on my way home from South Carolina to New York, to Long Island. I stopped in the city, met up with her, then I invited her naturally, when I found out that she didn't have anywhere to go, to my family's house for Christmas. Well, upon coming home and having a couple days with my parents in between, where my friend she was still in the city, I told them that I invited my friend to come to Christmas. And my dad, the first thing he said was, "Is she black? You better ask your uncle if that's okay." Because it would have been the first black person that ever came to a family Christmas. And so, you know, I just said, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not asking it. Well, I think I might have asked him, and of course they said it was okay, but it's like, you know, why is the fact that this person is black trumping the fact that if it were anybody else and they didn't have a place to go for Christmas, you would have extended your home, no questions asked. So it's just
such great
sharing that I think probably resonates with so many, whether the experience was similar or there's some parallels. Sarah, was there something else you were?
Yeah, well, we haven't heard anything from Peggy or Claire, and I certainly am respectful of their right to listen, but I would love to hear their thoughts, or if they just feel like they haven't been able to break in, I want to make sure that they feel heard as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to put them on the spot either, so we can certainly keep moving forward.
Hey, listen, I know I'm not always the only one that doesn't know how to do the technology, so I appreciate you asking the question, because they might be trying to raise their hand. But good. Thank you, Claire. I'm glad that you're here. Okay. Wow. Also, Sarah's going to keep me on track with the time. I heard so much there as we were talking about the calling out. It made me think about, we have to call out. I don't want to use the word gently. Call out in a way where folks can hear us. Again, basic rules of communication. If we want to be heard and it be received and we not shut down the conversation, sometimes you just have to yell it, like on the trip. I'm sick of this. Are you a racist? I'm jumping over the side of the boat if you are. You know, we can reach that point. And sometimes that's necessary to get some attention. Other times, we might have to clutch our pearls, and we need to look at some of our suffragist some of our sisters historically, and they would say, well, it would seem to me that if the law says A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z are happening, so I'm really trying to square up how this is an appropriate response to this. Put the question out there. I mean, are you a racist is a question too. But we can put a more generic question out there, which we know there should only be one logical, rational answer. But there's also this thing called rational lies, L-I-E-S. We rationalize things to support our position. But when we are trying to push the envelope and raise our hands, we got to put a plug in, having those networks that we talked about. If you're not the only one out there, and you've got some homies behind you, or you've got this network, or I'm with the group, and we're all having the conversation, then you might not be ready for the blowback, but you do know that you're not crazy, you're not the only one out there, and you can go back and lick your wounds with some other people that have some similar experiences to share. So another reason for having a network and being engaged with groups like Will or what have you.
So we're reaching, I think we're even a little past the end of our official time. I certainly don't want to cut off a conversation if there are other thoughts or things that people want to share, because I think that, that's why we're here, not just to mark a clock, but, to really start this discussion. So just want to check in with everyone and see if anyone else has any other thoughts or, things that really resonated with the book that they hadn't thought about before, something that they're, some self-examination that you did as a result, just any closing thoughts from everyone. Well, Anita, thank you so much. I think that we tackled some tough topics, but these types of conversations are important so that we can recognize these cultural norms that are holding us back, and we can start sincerely listening to marginalized voices. And I think that that's something that you have said throughout, is that, if you go to things with in a place of listening and wanting to really hear what others are saying and where they're coming from, that you can start these conversations. So that we can do our work towards equity in our country, in our world. So we really hope that this is just the first hour of a lifelong conversation. And again, I hope that, I feel like that tendency to want everything to be perfect. I don't want to say anything because I don't know exactly how to say it in a perfect way and and anyone who knows me that's on this call knows me and my perfectionism. And I think that that's something that resonated for me as well, and that we just know that we don't have to have perfect conversations. We just need to have conversations coming from the right place. So we hope that, this was meaningful to you. We hope that, you will continue to have these conversations going forward. Thank you for your hour and 5 minutes now, 6 minutes. Anita, thank you for taking the time to facilitate this. When we leave the meeting, you will see a link to a short survey. We'll also be sending an email with a link to the survey later this evening. We really do value your feedback, and we hope that you'll be candid with us. We appreciate your responses, not just for this, but for planning future meetings. And we're going to try to mix up book clubs. Not every session is going to be a tough topic. We realize, we don't all need to have to tackle tough topics all the time. And so we're going to have lots of different kinds of books. Last month, we had something that was more of a kind of a self-help, personal improvement. And so we'll continue to mix it up. So I hope that you'll continue to watch what our topics are, and that we can, share this with our friends and build this group, this network with our monthly book club. We always love for you to share comments about book club on social media. Our handle is @scwomenlead.net, and you can find us all across social media. So before we say goodbye, I'd like to thank a generous donor who made a gift in the honor of Dr. Susan D. Boyd, a brilliant woman who always cut her own path and was certainly never afraid to have tough conversations herself, for making this monthly book club possible. So thank you again for all for attending tonight and making time in your busy schedules, and for thinking about these difficult conversations that we all need to be having. Anita, do you have anything that you'd like to add before we leave?
Someone said it better. See something, say something, and I'll add, and wait for it. see something, say something, and wait for it, because it's going to come back. Folks aren't always going to be happy, but know that you did the right thing. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.